I'm Gwen Young, the COO of the Women Business Collaborative, and we are so thrilled to have Susan Maza today, the founder and CEO of Random Acts of Leadership, join us for our WBC February chat. It's the end of the month, I guess. It'll be March 1st on Monday in Women's History Month, so this is great. Susan has worked for over 25 years with companies around the world to transform their performance, relationships, and their work environment. So she's worked with people and organizations, and her clients' results have ranged from executive coaching clients getting their dream job or hard-won promotion, or to coaching a team and adding $1 billion to the bottom line of the company. Random Acts of Leadership help leaders elevate their leadership and amplify their impact and influence in their workplace and in their life. Susan is known for her ability to make the complex simple and theory actionable, especially when it comes to leadership. She is an author and founder of the highly acclaimed blog, Random Acts of Leadership, and has earned her recognition as a top thought leader, and leadership expert in places like Inc. Magazine, Trust Across America, Trust Around the World. We are thrilled to have her. She has joined the WBC Leaders Council as of January of this year, so we consider her part of the family, part of our champions. Susan, I'm going to turn it over to you, and I welcome everybody to put some questions in the chat. Susan's going to give you the rules of the road, but thank you for coming today, and we're so happy to have you all here.
Thanks so much, Gwen. I am thrilled to be here, and I'm thrilled to be part of the Women's Business Collaborative as part of the Leadership Council, and I continue to look forward to all the different ways that I can be of service to this community. So this is a great opportunity for me today to do that. So let me just get this started. Okay, so welcome to Ignite Your, 3 ways to ignite your next level of leadership. And I'm so excited to have the opportunity to introduce you to a simple yet incredibly potent system that's going to give you instant access to taking your leadership to your next level. We're going to talk about leadership, specifically your leadership. And I have 2 requests. One is to participate. At times, I'm going to ask you to put something in the chat, and I also invite, and I ask that you do so. Please do engage in the chat with each other throughout. If you have questions, feel free to ask them, put them in the chat. Elsa and Gwen are going to be keeping track of the questions, but I'm going to actually take questions at the end because I have a lot I want to cover in a really short period of time. So we're going to do questions towards the end. So I'll begin with a fundamental belief that you don't have to be the leader to be a leader. So let's find out where you see yourself right now. So if you already see yourself as a leader in some dimension of your life or work, I'd like you to enter into the chat, I'm a leader. And if you don't quite see yourself as a leader at this moment in time, I would like you to type into the chat, I'm an aspiring leader.
We have a couple leaders, Lewis, Robin, Kristen, Michelle.
I don't know where to do this.
Do you know how to find your way to the chat?
Rita.
There's a button on your bar that says chat. If it doesn't show up right away, sometimes there's a little more button. If you click the more button, you'll see the chat. Great. And now, if you haven't entered anything into the chat, either I'm a leader, I'm an aspiring leader, I want you to just put I'm here. I just want to know that you're here. So I'm going for 100% participation. So I request that you stay with me throughout and keep giving feedback. And Elsa's going to keep tabs on the chat for me. Okay, great. So have you ever wondered what it would be like to both live true to who you are and be powerful in a way that produces results and empowers others? Have you ever wondered what it would feel like to know without a doubt that you could make the difference that you want to make? And have you ever wondered what would be possible for you and the people that live and work with you if the person sitting in your chair stepped into their full potential to lead? So here's what you're about to discover. In a moment, I'm going to share a simple yet powerful approach to elevating your leadership to your next level through 3 simple actions anyone can take every day. And in the process, I'm going to talk about 3 things. The first is the myth that gets in the way of realizing your leadership potential. The second is how to access your leadership power instantly. And the third is the key to breaking through to your next level. And I'm going to make you a promise. A promise is that by the end of the time we're finished today, you're going to see actions you can take to elevate your leadership immediately. So you're going to see some new actions. You're going to be thinking about leadership differently than perhaps you ever have before. And I'm going to teach you as much as I can in the short hour that we have together. And before I finish, I promise to show you how to take it further. And I have a mission for you. And here's your mission: to identify one bold action you're going to take in the next 7 days to make a difference in something you care about, and discover how simple it can be to elevate your leadership one action at a time. So your mission, if you choose to accept it, is to identify one bold action you're going to take in the next 7 days to make a difference in something that you care about. So if you accept this mission, please type yes in the chat box. Okay, Elsa, are we hearing from people? You still with me, Elsa?
Sorry, I was on mute. Yes, we're getting lots of responses, lots of yeses. 2 yeses from Linda.
That's awesome. Okay, great. I'm going to look forward to hearing what those actions are when we get to the end. So we're going to see if mission was accomplished. Okay, so I'm going to begin with a problem. And I've worked with thousands of people from around the world in transforming their relationships and the results for over 25 years. And through the years, I've seen a fundamental problem that persists, and it keeps people stuck. It keeps organizations stuck. It's called resignation. It's that feeling that no matter what you do, you just can't make the difference you want to make. You could even say it's a feeling of being powerless. And in those moments when you feel powerless to make the difference you want to make, to change the things for the better for yourself and others, to feel confident that you're the one who could make the difference right now. In those moments, it can feel like there's an invisible wall between you and where you are now and what you know you're capable of. And I found this great video that kind of exemplifies, it kind of demonstrates the invisible walls. I'm just going to play this very short clip for you. Looks come. Okay, so that's what it feels like to hit the invisible wall. And it also feels like this. Now, I want to mention that the invisible wall is not the same thing as the glass ceiling. The glass ceiling is a systemic reality that we continue to work through, and this organization, the Women's Business Collaborative in particular, is committed to this. But it was created and it's maintained kind of outside of us. So there's things we can do personally, and we can work together collectively. But what I'm talking about here is the invisible wall that you come up against inside of you. The thing that's between you and having the job you want, having the life you want, having work go the way you want. So there are a few things more painful in life than having an aspiration that you know deep down you're capable of achieving, and knowing you're capable of so much more, but somehow, no matter how hard you work or how hard you try, you just can't seem to break through. And I know this invisible wall all too well, and I'd like to take a few moments to share a little bit of my story about why I began this mission, to empower people to realize their leadership potential, and how it led to my quest to make leadership simple and accessible to anyone. So the day I graduated from college was a really important day for my family because I was the first to graduate from college. I was the first to earn my degree. And with it came really high hopes and expectations for my future. My career got off to a great start, and I worked in the IT, and I was an IT professional for 14 years. And yet all through the way, I had something pulling inside of me that this wasn't it. So I had a great job. I was doing a great job, but I knew this wasn't it for me, that there was something else I was called to do. And perhaps you can relate to that. So in 1996, I decided to make a major career change. I went from working on computer systems to transforming human systems. I went from being an expert to being a beginner overnight. But I was excited more than scared because I was on a mission to unleash the human spirit at work. And that made me very excited about the future and what I was about to do. Now, a lot of people told me I was crazy. Quite a few said no one would hire me because I didn't have the right experience or the right degree. But I landed my dream job. I finally aligned my personal passions with my professional aspirations. I was very happy to prove those people wrong. And given how well the first leg of my career went, I was really confident that things were going to continue to go great. Well, it didn't go so well. In fact, the next year was the toughest year of my career. No matter how hard I worked or how hard I tried, I seemed to keep falling short. I was confused. I was resigned. I started thinking, maybe I'm not cut out for this kind of work. Maybe I made a mistake in making this big career change. And then I had my first performance review. That just made it worse. I sat down, and the first thing the guy giving my performance review said was this. He said, "I'm not going to beat around the bush. You are failing." It was like I had been punched in the stomach, like somebody had knocked the wind out of me. I really wanted to quit in that moment. And the people that I had been working directly with for an entire year, you know, I knew I was struggling. I wasn't doing what they wanted me to do, but they never used the F word. So that was really hard to hear. But I spent the next 2 years trying to prove myself. I worked harder than I thought possible, and I did some work that I'm exceedingly proud of. But it took its toll. I was exhausted. I no longer felt connected to myself or my purpose. And looking back, it's ironic that our mission was to unleash the human spirit at work, because mine was not unleashed. And when I looked around me, neither was anyone else's. And I realized that's exactly what happens when leadership fails. So I made a decision. I made a decision to quit and venture off on my own. And I took a stand that the kind of leadership that sucks the life out of people and diminishes people in organizations would not stand a chance on my watch. Yet there was a critical lesson I had to learn so that I could truly take my power back once and for all. You see, I realized I was the one who gave my power away. I was the one who let other people define my success. But I had to figure out how both how I gave my power away and why. So I had a lot of work to do, and it took longer than I would honestly really like to admit, but it's hard-won lessons that I now, fortunately, can shorten the process for many other people. But this leads me to the myth that gets in the way of realizing your leadership potential, that you can prove your way to the next level. Because I see it every day in my work with clients and even my life, and this is how I know that this is a myth. But it's also how I know that people believe this myth. So let's do a poll with some of the ways that I can recognize when someone is trying to prove themselves. And so just check, yeah, there's a poll up, so you should be able to answer the poll.
Can everyone see it? The poll.
Yes.
Okay, great. We're getting a few responses.
Takes a minute to kind of digest all
Yeah.
that there. Yeah.
There we go.
Yep. Lots of people saying work too, we're past the point of exhaustion to prove your worth. Focused on making others happy. That's a big one. Worried about what others think, sometimes losing sight of what you think. Yep. 50% so far are saying all of the above. You got 2 more people who haven't responded yet. I don't know, maybe it's counting me. All right, great.
I'm going to go ahead and end it. Is that okay?
Yep, good. Thanks.
Share the results.
Right, so worked to or past the point of exhaustion to prove your worth. Yep, that's not so uncommon. You know, if your answer was yes to one or more of these questions, you are definitely not alone, which you're seeing now. In fact, all it means is that you're human. But consider that these are all clues that you're trying to draw your power from outside of you, at least in the moments when you're doing those things. It's not like you do that all the time, but I'm going to suggest that especially when you have a pattern of any one of these things, it tells you something about where you're trying to draw your power from. Because when the real source of your power, and the only source, quite honestly, that's going to get you to that next level, whatever your next level may be, is from the inside. You know, my most important realization of all of this was that I could not reach my next level as long as I was focused on proving myself to others, because my focus in those moments was on them rather than me. And I'll suggest that, oh, I have a button I can share the results, which I didn't do. Okay. All right. I can't get rid of the poll. Is there some way for you to get rid of that, Elsa?
Is it gone now?
It's not gone.
Huh. Because I'm not sharing it.
And oh, there, we can see it. Nope, we don't see it. Well, we can see it.
There we go. It's gone. Good. It's gone. So sorry about that. So, you know, I've done all of these things, and I could make a list of 100 things that indicate that you've lost your power. Elsa, can you turn this, do whatever you did again so we can hide it, because it's showing on the screen. Okay, good.
Okay.
All right, cool. Thank you. But what I know from personal experience, very personal experience, is the high cost of doing these things, especially the work to or past the point of exhaustion to prove your worth. It landed me in the hospital. It was the culmination of chronic illness and exhaustion brought on by chronic intense stress, most of which I put on myself. And laying in that hospital bed on Christmas morning with my daughter at home, wondering where mommy was, she was 3 at the time, I had an epiphany. You see, after slamming into that invisible wall over and over, trying to get them to really see me, to hear me, to believe in me, was an exercise in futility. You know, the interesting thing is I had worked for 14 years and got nothing but glowing performance reviews and feedback. And here I was, I changed where I was working, and all of a sudden, well, it couldn't all have been me. But I had fallen into the all too common trap of trying to prove myself to others at all costs, rather than be driven by what I wanted and a belief in myself that I had something special and distinct to offer. So I realized that my future really was up to me. You know, you can say that like it's a theoretical thing, but I'll tell you what, laying in that hospital bed, almost barely being able to lift my head off the pillow, I realized I had to make some changes, and I had to stop relying on the outside world to tell me what I wanted and whether I was good enough or not. I had to figure out how to come from the inside out. And the only way to get to my next level, to realize my aspirations, was to stop focusing on the people and the forces outside of me, the things I had no control of, and to figure out how to generate my personal power from inside, something I had complete control over. I had to choose what I wanted and go to work on making it so. And this epiphany really put me in the driver's seat of my career and my life, quite honestly. In fact, it led me to moving to Florida. I was living in New Jersey at the time. My husband hated it in New Jersey. But it led to me realizing that I needed to make a lot of changes in life so that I could first and foremost get well. And then so that I was well and ready to go and do what I really wanted to do, what really called to me on my own terms. You know, I like to say that authenticity is the new charisma. Your success, your personal power comes from you being the best version of you rather than trying to be like someone else. Embracing the belief that the most potent source of your power is generated from within is a game changer. And I want you to consider that proving yourself is an act of giving away your power. And it's also the opposite of being authentic. Your power doesn't come from how others see you, but rather how you see you. And true power is generated from the inside out. Power doesn't come from title, level, or position. And what I'm going to share in a moment is how embracing your inherent power to lead, to be a leader for what matters most to you, is the antidote to trying to prove yourself, and the secret to accessing your power from the inside out each and every day. So I started to wonder, how can I support people in reclaiming their power, their belief in their own ability to make a difference? And in the process, I discovered that the solution to feeling powerless was this. It requires that you claim your inherent ability to lead. It requires that you start being a leader, regardless of whether you are the leader in any given situation. And that's how my quest to make leadership available and accessible to anyone began. You know, and I'm not talking about the theory of leadership. I mean something very specific when I use the word leadership, and that is speaking up, stepping up, and standing up for something that matters to you and makes a difference for others. So for me, asking the question like defining leadership, what is leadership, was almost like the question that was the booby prize, because I can get the theory of leadership, but I started to get a lot more interested in what does leadership look like in action. The other thing I want to say is I was doing a lot of organizational transformation work, and even when I decided to quit my job and go off on my own, I was still doing that kind of work. I was doing coaching, but I was not specifically focused on leadership. So my realization that focusing on leadership was where it was at to teach people how to access their power was actually a revelation to me as well. So why is leadership the antidote to proving yourself? I'll give you 3 of the main reasons. The first is that there's a difference you want to make and it's bigger than you. In other words, you can't do it alone. And, you know, can you think of an aspiration or a contribution, something that you want to do right now that seems bigger than you can do alone? Do you struggle to ask for help or let others help you? I don't know about you, but that's something I continue to have to work on. But if so, I assure you, you are not alone. And not only can doing it yourself be exhausting, consider that trying to do it yourself is one of the things that will limit what's possible. The second reason is that we is a far more potent and powerful force than me. So not only can't you do it alone, but when you choose to engage others, you'll exponentiate your impact. Now, enter I'm in to the chat if you want to amplify your impact exponentially. So in a moment, I'm going to give you some very simple strategies for exactly how you can do this right away. We have some people who are in, Elsa?
Yes, we do. We're getting lots of responses. Michelle, Patricia, Lewis, Kristen.
I'm in. I just can't get my chat to work.
Okay, thanks, Karen. Awesome.
Linda and Andrea are in. Laura, Rita, lots of responses.
Fabulous. Thank you. And the third reason is this: if not you, then who? Who is more passionate, cares more about the things that are important to you and matter to you? So if you're tired of waiting for them, whoever the them is in some dimension of your life, and you're ready to say, this is up to me, then type yes in the chat. And Karen, you can just answer.
Getting lots of yeses as well.
That's great. Awesome. Thank you all for the way you're participating. I appreciate it. So, but then I ran into another problem. So I think it's safe to say that leadership is a rich and complex topic, but I've worked with thousands of people around the world, and there's one thing I've heard over and over again. And while it may be said in different ways, it comes down to this: I understand what leadership is in theory, but how do I do leadership? You know, I was working at Prudential, and I was doing a workshop for about 100 people, and you know, the conversation throughout the 2 days of the workshop, people were like, wow, all this stuff sounds great in theory, but how do I do it? Like, I go back to my office and I find I can't seem to figure, I don't know what to do differently. And that was in my prior life when I was working for, you know, for the initial company that I went to right after I left being an IT professional. And that was the problem I was really curious about and wanted to solve. You know, you read a great book. Another example of this is you read a great book, right? Or you go to a leadership workshop or a retreat, and what leadership is, how it works, super clear until you're back on the job and you try to apply it in your everyday work. So you try a few things, but then the inspiration and the insights fade, and you surrender to the intense demands of the day-to-day work, and somehow it gets lost. So I realized I have to solve that problem. I've got to figure out how to make leadership simple enough and accessible enough so you don't need to go back to work and refer to your notes in order to know what to do, right? That I needed to give people an access that was simple enough that when they got it, they could do it. So I started asking this question: how can we make leading simple? And my answer came in kind of an unlikely place and a little bit of a sad place, but I get to, one of the joys of my life is that every time I get to speak, I get to bring my dad present in my life and to the people that I work with. You see, in 2006, he was diagnosed with cancer, and he passed away 3 months later. And I was devastated because he was my rock in life and business. But he left an article in his estate book for us to find. And in that book was a poem by Robert Noel Tess called "To Remember Me." And it said, if by chance you wish to remember me, do so with a kind word or deed for someone who needs you. If you do all that I ask, I will live forever. And we started a movement of committing acts of kindness in my dad's memory, and we called it Jim's Ripples. So I was out in the world committing acts of kindness as a way to remember my dad and as a way to deal with my grief. And in the process, I discovered there was this whole movement called Random Acts of Kindness. And a few weeks after his memorial, I was on a plane headed home from New York, and there was an opportunity for me to commit an act of kindness. It was Friday. People were, aggravated because the weather was bad. Everything was delayed. The plane was packed. A gentleman came on, and the flight attendant was trying to take his bag, his check-in bag, his bag. There was no room in the overhead, so trying to take his bag from him, and he was like holding on for dear life. And it became pretty clear that he had some very expensive camera equipment in there, and I don't think I'd want to check that either. So there was nothing of importance in my bag. So I took it out and I handed it to the flight attendant and put his bag in. And didn't really think anything of it, just doing an act of kindness for my dad. But something interesting happened. Instantly, the mood on the plane changed. People started talking to each other. They started joking around with me. They started cooperating with each other. And as I was sitting in my seat and as we took off, I started thinking to myself, that was interesting. And I asked myself, did I commit an act of leadership or did I commit an act of kindness? What's the difference anyway? So as I went through that, the whole flight, I got to the end and we landed. Now, in the beginning, I'd gotten on the plane and I had been seated in the back, but I had some kind of traveler status. So I got moved to the front. I had a small briefcase, though, that when I took my bag out of the overhead, I forgot to take my briefcase. And I thought, I'm going to be sitting here forever because that was like 30 rows behind me. And a few minutes later, somebody taps me on the shoulder and I look back over my shoulder and I watch my briefcase traveling hand over hand over hand over the seat till it was delivered to my lap. And I was like, wow. And in that moment, I started asking myself a new question. What if committing an act of leadership could be as simple as committing an act of kindness? Now, if I asked you to commit an act of kindness today, enter yes in the chat if you think you could find an opportunity to do that.
Yes.
Thank you, Karen. Of course you can. That's because you inherently know what kindness is. But I'm going to suggest it's even more specific than that. You actually know what kindness looks like in action. So what if we could make leading that simple? So from this tragedy, the idea of random acts of leadership was born. You see, I discovered the key to making leadership simple is not to define what it is, but rather to show people what leadership looks like in action. And when you can see more opportunities to lead, you have more opportunities to take action as a leader. And the best part is in the process, with every act of leadership that you commit, you tap into your power. And that's what I meant when I said earlier, like, what's the access to your, instant access to your power? It's by committing acts of leadership. And I'm going to go into a little more detail in a moment. So 12 years ago, I went to work on inventing a way to help people transcend these challenges on how to make leadership simple and how to teach people how to lead in their everyday life and work. And that solution is the Leadership in Action system. And it's powered by a very simple yet potent approach, the Leading Made Simple methodology. And in a moment, I'm going to introduce you to the methodology because it's the foundation for the system. But I'm also going to share how simple leadership can be. You're going to discover how to recognize leadership in action. In just a few moments, you're going to see opportunities to commit acts of leadership all around you so you can take action immediately to elevate your leadership. Now, this is where, are you ready to choose that action to fulfill on your mission that you accepted in the beginning, right? To choose a bold action you're going to take in the next 7 days. Are you ready? Great. But I just want to take one quick moment to share with you my bigger reason and why I'm sharing all of this with you. I'm here to remind you of your potential. And I want to ignite your passion to elevate your leadership and let you know that it's possible. And it's not some possibility like way out there in the future, that it's possible right here, right now. My bigger reason is I'm committed to people stepping into their greatness, to accessing their power to be and do the remarkable. one of the first people to go through the first iteration of a leadership and action system program was Lori Zeitz, and she's a chief engineer at the Navy Department of Defense. And when she put herself into the program, she was so discouraged. Now, this is a person who went to MIT and graduated in 4 years with her master's degree. She is both hardworking and incredibly brilliant. Yet she felt like every day, she didn't even want to go to work anymore. And she had been somebody who was a top performer and very, very engaged and active. But she had been working in an environment that just pretty much sucked the life out of her. And so she came to the program kind of in that state. And at the end, when she said to me, I'm no longer playing small, I'm playing big again. I'm being the leader that I know I could be. Those are the moments that I live for. And so that's why I do what I do. But that's what's possible when you really take on this idea of committing acts of leadership each and every day. So since that aha moment, when I began to consider how I could make committing an act of leadership as simple as committing an act of kindness, I started paying close attention to what leadership looked like in action. I observed people in many walks of life. I observed the people I was working with. I observed people who had titles and those who didn't have titles, right? People in positions of power and people in the mailroom and every other dimension. Like, it wasn't about level for me. And I came to the conclusion that there are 3 fundamental acts of leadership: speaking up, stepping up, and standing up. So I'm going to take you quickly through each of them so you can begin to spot leadership in action and start to see opportunities for you to lead in new ways from this moment forward. So the first act of leadership is speaking up. And the first principle of speaking up as an act of leadership, because remember that you can speak up for, these are everyday actions that human beings take, right? But what makes an act of leadership of speaking up actually an act of leadership? And the first one is that it's the purpose of speaking up. And so it's when you're speaking up to make a difference. It's the difference between, I like to say is, a complaint is not a committed conversation, right? But sharing what isn't working in the spirit of making things better, now that's a committed conversation. So you can begin to see the difference. So the point is that when I'm complaining, right, there's no difference I want to make. I'm just trying to get it off my chest. But when I'm speaking to make a difference, I can talk about the very same complaint, but the context is different and the way I'm going to deliver it is different. So speak to make a difference. And an example of this is a great way to speak to make a difference is say the thing that no one else will say. You're sitting at a meeting and there's like this elephant in the room and nobody's talking about the thing that needs to be talked about. And you leave the room and everybody's talking about it around the water cooler. Well, now I'm not sure where those conversations happen, maybe in people's text messages, because not many of us are around water coolers these days. But saying what no one else will say, where it can make the biggest difference. The second aspect or principle of speaking up as an act of leadership is to speak your truth. And that is distinct from speaking the truth, right? If I say it is this way, or it occurs to me that this is how it is, it's owning that this is your perspective, because the moment we say something is so, something is true, the person on the other end who doesn't believe us can't even hear us because they have an opposing point of view. And all we're doing is coming up against each other. So learning to speak your truth as though it is your truth, not the truth, is a big aspect of what it takes to speak up as an act of leadership. And the third principle is to speak for the future. Share a possibility. Speak up not just to air a complaint or say that something's not working, but to actually speak up to say, this is what's possible. This is what we could do. This is what we will do. I have one of the women who's gone through my program, her name is Tina Lang, and her big challenge was she ran a PR agency at the time, and her biggest challenge was she had people working for her, and she had a heck of a time delivering the tough feedback to people, but it was essential feedback. And she had to learn how to speak up about that, how to be able to speak up and speak powerfully when it came to have the tough conversations. She was a kind person, so she had a hard time doing it. And she had to learn some new ways of thinking about what tough feedback really was all about, that it was an opportunity to honor people for being and doing their best rather than beating them up, and exactly how to do that in a way that she could come from a place of power and not lose herself and her kindness and who she was committed to being as a leader. So speaking up as an act of leadership is not about what you have to say or about being heard or even about being understood. It is about the difference you make because you had the commitment and courage to speak up for the sake of the future. I like to say that change happens one conversation at a time. Things get stuck. You get caught in the organizational inertia. One conversation at a time too, when we have perpetual complaints going on behind the scenes that nobody's doing anything about. But if you are speaking from acts of leadership, you actually have the power to cause change, one conversation, one message at a time. So I want you to think for a moment, what could you speak up about? And if you have something to share, please put it in the chat. And Elsa's going to kind of keep track of these things, and we're going to come back and share them at the end of this segment. And here's a hint, and I've kind of alluded to this before. Look for where there's a persistent complaint, your complaint or someone else's. That is a great place to look for something that you could speak up about. Second act of leadership, stepping up. So the first principle of this is be the one to move things forward, right? And when I say that, I mean be willing to be the one to take bold action, right? The second step there, principle of step up, is all about stepping up, is all about intervening in the status quo, right? So when we're stepping up, we can step up to do something, or we could step up as an act of changing something. And this is how you transform a complaint into a possibility. And another aspect of stepping up is, remember I said before, it's not all about you doing it all. So stepping up isn't just about what you do. It's about you looking around to see who you can enroll to step up with you, right? How can you empower people? What requests can you make of people that will have them step up and out of their own comfort zone and give the best of what they have to make a difference? You know, I have a client, her name is Rachel, and she actually just texted me this morning because she talks about how her confidence has grown from taking action consistently that produces new levels of results. And one of the things she shared with me was that I give her tools that she learns and uses day in and day out. And it's like building more like muscle memory. Like I said before, it's not like having things on a shelf or in a book that you have to go back to. They're part of how she thinks and how she works naturally now. And she texted me this morning to say that she was in a big meeting, and she's one of the younger people in this particular organization. And she was able to get them to see that they were not focused. They had no idea. They were not on the same page about how they were moving forward, about what defined success. And she put that in, and everyone went with an assignment to come up with a "why are we doing this" statement. And she's like, I never would have done that before working with you. I never would have had the courage to speak up and to step up in that way, to make a request of other people to take an action who were all a higher level than me. So stepping up as an act of leadership is not about working harder or doing more or doing it all yourself. It is about being the one to move things forward, to boldly challenge the status quo and enroll others in taking ownership for the sake of the future. So what could you do to step up? Well, a place to look for what you could do to step up is what is stuck, stopped, or slowed in your own life, in your own work, in your organization. What is stuck, stopped, or slowed? So what opportunity do you have to step up? What could you do to step up? So if you have something, please put it in the chat. Remember, we're looking to accomplish your mission, to identify that one bold action you're going to take. So hopefully the wheels are turning now and you're starting to think about things that you could be doing. The third act of leadership is standing up. And it begins with living true to your values and your aspirations. You know, it's all about walking your talk. You know, you don't have to actually conjure up a stand to look at, are you living true to the stand you've already taken in terms of your values, but also your aspirations? Are you saying yes to things that fuel your aspirations and no to things that, you know, or you no to things that don't? Or are you saying yes to everything because you think you need to, or you're trying to prove something, as we talked about before? So we all begin with core stands that are our values that we start with. Another way to stand up is to declare a commitment to a better future, right? We are going, Kennedy's famous a man on the moon by the end of the decade, is a great example of declaring a commitment to a better future, even when you don't know how. But there are all kinds of moonshot declarations we could make. The Women's Business Collaborative has a commitment to elevate women in the workplace, get them into the boardroom, get them into the senior levels of organizations. That's a stand. And there's a whole organization built around it, and actions taken every day, right? They've made a promise, and they're following through in word and deed by taking action aligned with that stand each and every day. Now, I have a client, his name is Philip, and he also works for the U.S. Navy. And all he did with me was a 90-minute Leading Made Simple workshop. And I never even met him in the workshop because there were over 100 people in the room. And he contacted me 6 months later to let me know that that was the day he decided that he wasn't wondering whether he was going to become a leader, but he realized he could see in all of these acts of leadership that he already was a leader. And it gave him the courage to apply for a spot in a highly competitive program in Maryland where he was living. And before walking in that room, he was like, he'd seen the program. He's like, I'm not even qualified. He wasn't going to apply. So not only did he go out and apply, but I just talked to him a few weeks ago. He went through the whole program, and he was chosen to give the commencement address. Now, had he not seen himself as a leader, he never would have taken the action. And that's how powerful this is. Standing up as an act of leadership is not about being the leader, using your position to get things done, or even being the one out in front. It is about making a promise for a better future and following through in word and deed. So what stand could you take? And here's a few hints on the other little language prompts you can use. I promise, fill in the blank. We can make small declarations, by the way. You could take a stand. You could say, I promise for the next 30 days, we are going to have the best meetings in this organization that we've ever had, even if you have no idea how to do that, right? So the promises that you make don't have to be like ending world hunger kind of promises. They are putting a man on the moon. Look around you in your everyday life and work, and what promise could you make, and then go to work on making it so. Another prompt you can use is you can count, when you want to take a stand for someone else or be in support of someone else, is let them know what you can count on. They can count on from you. You can count on me too. When you're leading an organization or a group, making the declaration that I or we will fill in the blank. Keep it simple. And that's how a stand begins. It's as simple as I promise, you can count on me to, I or we will. And then going to work every day, taking actions, committing acts of leadership to make it so. So what does leadership look like in action? I shared this definition before, but I thought it might be helpful to repeat it here. Leadership is speaking up, stepping up, and standing up for something that matters to you and makes a difference for others. If you can see opportunities to lead, you can seize them. And, I share this screen. My husband is a paleontologist. He does fossil hunting tours in the Peace River. And the first time he showed me a pile of gravel, I looked in there and all I saw was rocks. But because he has a trained eye, now you can see some shark teeth in there, but he has a trained eye. He'll look in there and he'll see things I would never see because he is trained to look for them. When you train yourself to look for acts of leadership, not only does it create opportunities for you to commit more acts of leadership, but it allows you to acknowledge people for their acts of leadership, which causes other people to commit acts of leadership, right? It shows people what leadership looks like in action. And when people know what to do or how to do leadership, they take more actions, they access their power, and they do the remarkable. So leading is like riding a bicycle. Can you learn to ride a bicycle? Can you learn balance, the concept of balance, by reading a book on it? Of course not. And just as to learn to ride a bicycle, you have to learn to balance. And that concept of balance, the only way you can learn is get on the bike, wobble around, fall down, skin your knees a few times, get back on. Well, leadership is the same thing. And I'm going to suggest that you learn to access your power by committing acts of leadership. And yeah, you're going to fall down, you're going to make mistakes, you're going to find your limits. But that's the instant access to your power that I referred to earlier. Now, I suggest you write this next thing down. If you want to learn how to lead you, you need to act before you know how. If you want to learn how to lead, you need to act before you know how. And that's the same concept of getting on the bicycle. You don't know how yet, but you're going to figure it out. You have a concept of what success looks like, right? But you're going to get on the bike and you're going to figure it out. But it does take courage to put yourself out there. For some, speaking up in front of a group of 10 people takes extraordinary courage. The magnitude of the act of leadership really doesn't matter. Yet I'll suggest that while leading does require courage, in the end, it's worth it, because the risk you're taking gives you something in exchange. What's available to the courageous is freedom. And it's a particular kind of freedom. It's the freedom to thrive. It unleashes your power to be who you want to become. It unleashes your power to have the life you want and do work that inspires you. And ultimately, it unleashes the most satisfying power of all, your power to make a difference in the things that matter most to you. So if you get anything out of this today, I want you to put this on the back of your mind and write it on a piece of paper, that developing your leadership is your access for you to thrive. So I'm going to come back to our mission to identify one bold action you will take in the next 7 days to make a difference in something you care about, and discover how simple it can be to elevate your leadership one action at a time. So if you already have that one bold action, I'm going to ask you to put that in the chat. And hopefully, talking about speaking up, stepping up, and standing up gave you some ideas. So that's one bold action. I'm going to have you put it in the chat, and we're going to come back to that in just a minute. But please put your ideas in the chat. So while you're putting those things in, I just want to share with you is that I created a quiz called "What is Your Leadership Style?" Because when it comes to committing an acts of leadership, we all have different kind of styles. We have different approaches to that. And I created this quiz as a way to have you identify what your style is, whether you're a trailblazer, a team leader, a strategist, a connector, or an orchestrator. And then when you do the quiz, you'll get an instant result that will tell you what you are, and you'll get some idea of what's the way that you naturally approach committing acts of leadership. So that can be really empowering to understand what your strengths are. Now, I'm not one to put people in boxes. A lot of times people come up with like a trailblazer or a strategist. They say, yeah, well, I'm a strategist, but I also think I'm a connector. You're probably more than one of these, but it can give you just some ideas on what acts of leadership look like given your most dominant style. So I invite you to take the quiz at quiz.leadinginaction.com. That's quiz.leadinginaction.com. I don't know, Elsa, would you mind putting that in the chat?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great, thank you. Okay, so I'm gonna stop sharing my screen for a moment, and let's see. I'm looking back in here.
Yeah, so we have a lot of good actions and commitments that are coming up in the chat. Did you want me to read some of them, or do you want to sift through?
I'm in here now. I can see the chat. Amazing. Okay. Cool. Let's see. Fostering leadership training at all levels of your organization, connecting the dots between women leadership organizations committed to gender diversity, developing venues and opportunities to open doors for emerging women leaders, inviting your younger staff into leadership. That's awesome. Beginning and hosting weekly live Zoom conversation for leaders in business and policy, strengthening value-oriented leadership in positions of power. One-on-ones every week with all of your leaders, thinking big. One-on-one conversations with NIA staff about leadership, looking for acts of leadership among your employees. So here's what I'm going to suggest you do with that. Some of you have really specific actions like Zoom call once a week. I'm going to suggest whatever you put here, turn it into a specific next action that you're going to take, right? So look for acts of leadership amongst my employees. So an example I'm talking about would be, I'm going to identify and acknowledge at least one person for committing an act of leadership a week for the next month, or a day for the next month, right? So you can take that concept, right, and turn it into an actual practice that can get you on the court. So thank you so much for participating. Again, I invite you to go to quiz.leadinginaction.com. I'd like to take some questions. Do you have any questions?
If people want to ask questions, they can unmute themselves as well. You don't have to just drop them in the chat at this point.
This is Kristen. Thank you so much for this. And I'm just curious, what would be the stumbling blocks you might expect leaving your workshop and going into real life? Is there anything we should be watching out for?
Yeah, right. So when you take bold actions, sometimes things don't go as planned, right? So the first thing I'm going to suggest is before you take action, be crystal clear about the commitment you have. So people don't always react well to bold actions or bold declarations, right? But one of the things I'm going to suggest you do to kind of increase the odds that, just in speaking up, for example, that it lands well, is begin with your commitment, right? Lead with what it is you're committed to. And that's essentially, why am I about to say what I have to say? You know, so if I look at an example of you're speaking up in a meeting and you're saying the thing that nobody else wants to say, is like, no, listen, I know this is a difficult topic. I know nobody really wants to talk about this, but I really feel that unless we do, we're not going to move forward. So I'm going to ask you to support, you know, I'm going to share something. It feels kind of risky. And here it is, right? So one of the things you can do is you can set up how people listen. So the pitfall is that you don't get a positive result. But from my point of view, that's a bit like getting on the bike and falling off. And a lot of times what happens is people will take an action and it's like, and they try, well, that didn't work. Okay, I'm not going to try this again. And so the thing I want to encourage you to is that the biggest pitfall at all is stopping after the first try, right? That is what I would say the biggest pitfall of all.
All right.
Did that answer your question?
All right. And so just sort of being respectful of everyone's time, we have time for, I think, about one more question if people are interested. And then Susan, maybe you can drop your email in the chat if people want to reach out afterwards as well with more questions. But
yeah, and I'll send this here. I'm about to launch the essentially a 90-day introduction to the Leadership in Action System program called Fire Up Your Leadership. And if you have interest in learning more about that program and finding out what's next regarding that, then I invite you to send me an email and let me know, and I'll send you more information on the program. It's not even launching until the middle of March, but I'd like to offer some extra coaching support for those from this group who participate. So if you're interested, let me know, and I'll follow up with you.
all right. Anything else? One last final question anyone has? Connie is asking about pausing before speaking and reminding yourself to take pauses.
Remind yourself to pause.
And back that one up. I know. I need to learn to do that. Great question, Connie.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you all for being here today. And also, you have my email. Please feel free to send me a follow-up question. A lot of times what happens on these calls is somebody has something and it's like really not something they wanted to share with the whole group, but they really would like to talk to somebody about it. So you should reach out to me on my email and I will absolutely get back to you. It's my pleasure to be able to support any woman in this community in any way I can.